Today we're going to go over solving quadratic equations by factoring, and we're also going to practice some word problems. So a quadratic equation is any equation that's written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So first we're going to practice solving quadratic equations. And the first step to solving a quadratic equation is making sure that everything is on one side while 0 is on the other side. So 0 is on one side of the equation all by itself. Then the next step is to just factor out like we did in the previous video. So you factor out the greatest common factor first, and then you're going to use the reverse FOIL method. Then you are going to just solve for the variable. So the first question, we have 2x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. And since the 0 is already on one side, we don't need to move anything here. So then we're just going to go straight to factoring. So we're going to look at this and we're going to see what two values multiplied at 2x squared. So it's x times 2x. So I'm just going to write that here. X and then 2x. And then we're going to look at the second part, negative 6, and we're going to not think about the negative in the beginning. So I'm just going to think of 3 times 2. So I'm going to write 3 here and 2 here. And we're going to multiply the two outer values, which gets to 2x, and the two inner values, which gets to 6x. But 6x and 2x, there's no way to get to negative x, so I'm going to start over right here. And this time, instead of 3 times 2, I'm going to try 2 times 3. So I'll go 2 and 3. So we have 3x on the outside and 4x on the inside. And it turns out that this does work because we just need to do negative 4x plus 3x. So we get the negative sign here and the positive sign here. So now I'm going to rewrite this just to make it neater. So it's x minus 2, 2x plus 3 equals 0. And when we solve for the variable, what we're going to do is we're going to say either this section equals 0 or this section equals 0. Because if this part equals 0, then 0 times anything is always going to be 0. So it can either be this part or this part. So if x minus 2 equals 0, then we get x equals 2. And if 2x plus 3 equals 0, then we get 2x equals negative 3, and we get x equals negative 3 over 2. So our answers for this question is x equals 2 or x equals negative 3 over 2. So we're just going to write it like this. And we can also write it in a different way. You can just write it like x equals 2 and negative 3 over 2. So either way would be the answer. So moving on to the next one. Our next one says 2x squared minus 4x equals 6. So first we're going to make sure that 0 is on one side of the equation by subtracting 6 from both sides. So 2x squared minus 4x minus 6 equals 0. Then we're going to factor out the greatest common factor, and in this case it's 2. So 2x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0. And then we're just going to factor this. So 2x, x, and my two factors for this is going to be 3 times 1. So we have 3, 1. Then we're going to think about the outside, which is going to be x, and the inside, which is 3x. And in order to get negative 2x, we're going to go negative 3x plus positive x. So we have negative here and positive here. So I'm going to rewrite that. So this equals x, 2 multiplied by x minus 3 multiplied by x plus 1 equals 0. So then in order to solve for x, we're just going to make this section equal to 0 and this section equal to 0. So our answer is x equals 3 and negative 1. So this would be our answer. Okay, so this is how you do these types of quadratic equation problems. And now we're going to move on to word problems. And these word problems are going to require you to set up a quadratic equation and solve for a variable. So the first question says, Bob threw a ball directly upward with an initial speed of 32 feet per second. How long was the ball in the air and how high did it go? And what's important for these types of problems is to know this formula. And I haven't written here, but I'll write it now. So the formula is h equals vt minus 4.9t squared. And h equals vt minus 16t squared. And this is when the distance in meters, and this is when the distance is in feet. So what this means this is kind of like a set equation, sort of like a physics equation. You sort of have to memorize it, or your teacher might give you a formula sheet or something. But basically, h stands for height, the distance the ball moves up, and these equations only work for when the ball is thrown directly upward, like vertical motion. And v stands for the initial velocity, and t is for time. So here it says bob threw a ball directly upward with an initial speed of 32 feet per second. So since this is in feet, we're going to use the second equation right here. And the initial speed is 32 feet per second, so I'm just going to substitute 32 for v. So we get h equals 32t minus 16t squared. So this is the equation we've got. And it says how long was the ball in the air? And to determine how long the ball was in the air, we're going to visualize this graph as a graph on an xy plane. So it's going to look something like this. The ball is going to be thrown up to this maximum height right here, and it's going to reach the ground here. And this is the height, and this is the time. So what we want to know is how long was the ball in the air. So we want to know the time right here, because this shows how long the ball was in the air, and then and how long it took for the ball to land. And in order to do that, we're going to make h equals 0, because this whole line here, h equals 0. So we want to know the value of t when h equals 0 to solve the first problem. So we're just going to substitute h equals 0 into this equation. So we get 0 equals 32t minus 16t squared. And here 0 is already on one side, so we're just going to factor this part. And in order to factor it, what we're going to do is factor out the greatest common factor. So that would be 16t. So 16t, 2 minus t. And in this case, we could either have this equals 0 or this equals 0. So either 16t equals 0 or 2 minus t equals 0. And we're just going to solve for this. So now we get t equals 0 and t equals 2. So t equals 0 is obviously here when the ball is first thrown, because the ball is thrown at a height of 0. And the second time is t equals 2. And that's when the ball lands. So the answer to our first question right here, how long was the ball in the air, we can conclude that it would be 2 seconds. That's the answer to the first question. So how high did it go? So if you remember parabolas, you know that this middle axis is the point of the axis of reflection, and it's exactly in the middle of this parabola. So the time at the middle point is t equals 1 right here. And that would give us the maximum height of the parabola. So what we want to do is we want to plug in t equals 1 into this equation, and we're going to solve for h to find the maximum height. So we have h equals 32, and time is 1, minus 16, 1 squared. But this just equals 32 minus 16 equals 16. So our answer right here is maximum height, so height is 16 feet. So this would be our answer. Okay. And there are obviously other ways of solving this equation. Like you could also use this formula and find the tip of it by doing negative b over 2a, but this would be the easiest way of doing it. Okay. Next question says, a rectangle is 3 centimeters longer than it is wide, and it has an area of 40 centimeters squared. Find its dimensions. So I'm just going to draw a picture of it now. So it's longer than it is wide, so its length is longer. So here's my rectangle. So let's say its width is x centimeters. Then its length would be 3 centimeters longer than it, and it has an area of 40 centimeters. So to find the area equals base times height. So we're going to do x times x plus 3, and this equals 40. And we are going to multiply this out. So we have x squared plus 3x equals 40. And here we have a quadratic equation. So all we need to do is solve for it to solve for x, so we can find the rectangle's dimensions. So the first step is to subtract 40 from both sides. So we're going to go x squared plus 3x minus 40. And this side becomes 0. Then we are going to factor this out. So the two factors of negative 40 I'm thinking of right now are 8 times 5. So x, and I'm just going to put 8 here and 5 here. And if we look at the outside, we get 5x. Look at the inside, we get 8x. And what we want to do here is we want to 8x minus 5x to get this positive 3x. So this is going to be positive, this is going to be negative. So this would be our equation. I'm just going to rewrite this here. X plus 8x minus 5 equals 0. So we know here that x either equals negative 8 or 5. But x cannot equal negative 8 because how do you have a negative length? So we're just going to eliminate that. So we're going to make x equals 5. That's our only choice. So if we substitute this in, x equals 5 here, and if we add 3, we get 8. So then our conclusion is, the answer is, the dimensions are 5 centimeters by 8 centimeters. So that would be our answer. Okay, next question. Next question says, Sally has a 6-inch by 8-inch painting. The painting has a uniform frame of unknown width. If the total area of the painting and frame is 120 inches squared, what is the width of the frame? So I'm just going to draw a picture. So this is my 6 by 8-inch painting, and it has a frame around it of uniform width, which means that it's the same width throughout. And it's unknown, so I'm just going to make this x. Write that in a different color. So this is x, this part is also x, this is x, and this is x, because the width is x. Then it says the total area of the painting and frame is 120 inches squared. So what is the width of the frame? So we're just going to write down the length and width of the whole rectangle, including the frame. So this whole thing right here would be this value 8 plus this x on the side plus this x. So it's going to be 8 plus 2x. And this side is going to be 6 plus 2x because we have the x up here and then the x here. So the area of the whole picture frame and photo is area equals base times height. So we get 8 plus 2x times 6 plus 2x. And it says the area is 120 inches squared. So we're just going to expand this. So we're going to write 8 times 6 is 48 plus 16x plus 12x plus 4x squared equals 120. And then I'm going to move this to the front. So 4x squared plus 28x plus 48 equals 120. Then I'm going to subtract 120 from both sides. Or actually, first I'm going to divide everything by 4 to make everything easier. So I'm just going to divide this by 4. Here, I'll write this down in orange. So I'm multiplying everything by 1/4, which is the same thing as dividing by 4. So you get x squared plus 7x plus 12 equals 30. Then we get x squared plus 7x. 12 minus 30 is negative 18 equals 0. So now we're just going to factor this so we can solve for x. So the two numbers I'm thinking of for 18 are 9 and 2. So x, and we have 9 and 2. And you can make the little thing that I made before, but I'm just not going to do that. I'm just going to write that. Okay. So we get x equals negative 9 and 2. And as we said before in the previous problem, it can't be negative 9 because you can't have a negative width. So we're going to eliminate this, and our only conclusion here would be 2. So therefore, x equals 2, which means that the width of the frame is 2 inches. Okay, this would be our answer. Thank you for watching.